Hello and welcome to everybody for this sunny August meeting of Access Europe. We've got Peter Cole, who is one of our experts in 32 to 64-bit conversion. If anyone can make the processing easy, Peter is the one who can do so. It's actually his second passion. Well, I think it's safe to say that themes in Access are his main passion. I was going to say obsession, but that's probably true as well. Yeah. But anyway, so this month we're led by Peter Cole. I apologize for the fact that my webcam has obviously died in the last week, or at least it's not working at the moment, so you won't see my ugly face. But Peter, if you are ready, I'm going to stop sharing and ask you to share your screen. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Over to you. Thank you, Peter.
Well, apart from from Jenny, most of you have probably already done quite a lot of 32 to 64-bit conversions, but I'm just going to go a quick recap in a second for the benefit really of people who are going to watch this video in the future who aren't so experienced as people who are here. I did do a video which is on the AccessUserGroups.org site, which goes into full detail of how to do the conversion process manually. But today we're going to be looking at a lot more automation that I've done. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with a very simple database with the showing the code there for GetUserName, which we all know that we probably wouldn't do it with an API, but this is a good example. So this indicates that there's a problem because it's showing up in red. Now, what I'm going to do is open my API viewer, which is going to be available for free. And what we want looking for is get username, and we'll get username A from the alias. We're going to put it into our API viewer. Find the declaration, paste that in. And that is the definition for the 64-bit version. So we're now going to go back to our code. Paste it in and comment this line. And the only difference between this one and that one, apart from the spacing, is the fact that we've got PTR safe in there. Okay. Can everybody see the font, or do I need to enlarge it a bit?
It's fine for me, but I suspect Crystal is going to ask you to make it larger.
Just what I was thinking. Tools, options, editor format. Go up to 14.
Okay, for me.
Is that better?
Okay, Crystal? Yep, she says yes.
Okay. So what we saw there was the API viewer, which has got all of the declarations from the Microsoft text file, plus a few others that we have found intervening time. Right, I'm going to close that for the moment. The question is, what is the size of the problem in updating a database? How many declares are there in there? So what I have created is an API scanner which allows us to look at a database or a number of databases in a document, in a folder. And we're going to look at the clipboard example. So we're going to search for a single database, and I've got the clipboard example. We're going to open that. Then we're going to process this database. So what it's found is that there are no unknown declarations and 10 known ones.
Peter, can you just clarify to others? I know what it means because I've seen this before. Can you just clarify what you mean in this context by known and unknown?
Known ones are ones that have come from the Microsoft text file, plus a few others that we have added as we've discovered the newer versions, the PTR safe versions. So what we're going to do is go back into the viewer. And we're going to open up the files that we're using for this. So we've got the declarations. So as you can see, we've got details on each one, whether it's a sub or a function, then its name. Then we have the full description. Then we have which DLL it's using, the alias name, whether it's if it's a function, what the return type is. Now, this isn't normalized because I've got duplicate data in here because the names and the alias are all within this code here. I've done this deliberately to make it easy to update so people can understand each individual line is a complete definition, so you don't have to relate to other tables. Going to close that one. And then the others is the list of other things which weren't in the Microsoft text file, but we've since discovered. So far, I've got 44 of them included. So we're going to come out of there. Now, we'll look at our Clipboard database, and we can see that we've got the 10 functions in there which need updating. I'm going to come out of that. Now going to run the updater on that. This has changed since people have seen it last time. We select the database that we want to update, which is in here in samples. And now we can analyze and process this. So we'll go straight through. This is a nice simple one. So it's saying what module it's processing. There's only one module in that. Nearly finished. Just a few more seconds. Okay, so that has now updated the clipboard example. Now we can have a look and see what it's actually done. I need to refresh that. If we double click on this module, it's opened WinMerge. Hopefully everybody is familiar with WinMerge or something similar. Allows you to compare two text files side by side.
Wonderful tool, if I can just say that.
Yeah, I will be putting the link to for the download on that. As you can see, there's an awful lot of differences here. So we've got in here, I can't see very well because we've got where it's changed from long to LongPtr to make it 64-bit compatible. It's changed this one because the Microsoft definition actually has a small w in the new version, whereas in the old one it had a large. Doesn't matter, of course, when we're dealing with parameters, because parameters can be any name you like. They just have to be the right type in the right place. The alias name, which doesn't appear in here because it's the same as the function name, but the alias name, and in this case, because there is an alias, the function name has to be in the correct case, because that's what the DLL actually uses. So then the DLLs are written in C, which is case sensitive. So we're now going to move down into the functions. And what I have done is I have updated the dims and using prefixes. Now that allows me to look at the dim and see what data type it is. So LNG for long, and LPT is for long pointer, and STR for string. So we've changed those, and we've had to add a couple there extra. So as we come down, we can see there's a lot of changes here. So quite a lot of changes have to be made because the calls will have potentially long pointers in them, and obviously the variables within the code have to be the right type. This is one of the reasons why I don't comment everything I've changed, because there would just be comments all over the place. So if we now come out of here and we go into our Clipboard database, we've got rid of all the red and we've got long pointers, etc. in there. Now I've generated some test screens so that we can see that the thing is actually working, because although you can update the declarations, that doesn't actually necessarily mean that it will all work. It's the obscure functions which cause you grief. Not this one. This is fairly simple. So if we click this one, it will allow us to put a bit of text. That will set it on the clipboard. And now if we use the get data, that's got the test data back. And obviously we can then clear the clipboard. And if we try to get the data again, it's going to error. No error trapping in these, because we're going to be throwing these away when we actually use the database. So we can end there. Right, we're going to have a look at a collection of samples. So we're going to run the scanner on the scanner is what I'm making available for free along with the API viewer. We're going to have a look at something which Colin might be familiar with, this on-screen keyboard. This is the one he just put up recently. So we're going to process this. And we now in here have 4 unknown declarations and 16 known ones. So we're going to say OK to that. Now, it's made some text files of the declarations. So if we view our results, the modules in which those were declared, or the module in this case, by storing the module and getting it sent to me, I can actually test. I don't need to in this case because Colin's already tested and this works for 64-bit. But there is no guarantee in a database that somebody hasn't just put PTR safe in there to make the thing compile. There's no guarantee that the actual function is going to work. So before releasing it into the API viewer, I want to be able to make sure that it actually works. And because API functions are often used in conjunction with each other, like the clipboard ones, there's 10 functions there and they all work together. So you actually need a bit of code rather than just the declarations. So if there's proprietary information in that module. You can edit it out before you send it off. We can click zip and send. And that will show you what is going to be sent. And we'll just, I'm going to change the email address I'm sending that from. I'm going to send that. Now, the reason this is an ACCDE rather than a DB is because I'm using VB Watchdog and VB Mappy, which are from Everything Access. So not something I can release to people. I'm going to close that down. We're now going to look at the thing which I use internally to create the updates. Before that, we're going to have a look at my Outlook. And we've got this folder 32 to 64. Obviously, you don't need that. This is just for my purposes. And we've got a declares in, and there's one file in there, which is the one that we have just created. Right, close that. Now, this is now showing us that declaration, and it's got the old version and the PTR safe version. It's giving us some detail about it. It's telling us what the return type is. It's saying, it's giving us an option to say whether this is a 32-bit or a 64-bit, or whether it works for both. If it works for both, then there's a 0 in there, but there are a small number of functions which are actually specifically 32 or 64-bit. But we can leave this as 0 because this works for both. Status is something I've got to let me know whether I've checked it or not. I know Colin's checked this. Status of 1 is okay. And source just tells me what email this information came from, so I can trace it back and ask people questions if I need to be able to.
Peter, can I just interrupt for a second?
Sure.
This particular example app that I updated just 3 or 4 days ago and then sent to Peter, it used to work perfectly well without this WOW64 revert API, but Microsoft changed the rules of the game. In fact, although it converts perfectly well to 64-bit, I don't need it in 64-bit. The on-screen keyboards load perfectly well in 64-bit, but in 32-bit, they don't anymore. But one way or the other, it still works as done here, but it's not actually necessary. I thought I'd say that because somebody, I'm sorry if I have just spoiled what you were going to say, Peter. No. Somebody might well have asked why something that says WOW 64 would actually need a 64-bit version anyway. Yeah, well, I'm just using this as an example of 2 nicely new unknown declarations, so we can see how they can be added. They're very strange. Certainly, I've not found many uses of it, I have to say. It's very obscure. No, okay. So it works, though. Yeah, we've got one. We'll go on to the second one. We'll make that a 1. Then we'll continue. Now, this would have picked up if there were any types used by those declarations, but there aren't because they're quite simple. I'm going to continue. This is my internal use, so the next one goes a bit wrong. Lib names, others. Library names, I store a list of the commonly used DLL names, and this will allow me to find other ones which are unusual. So there's a couple which I've come across. One in particular was a zip DLL, which is ancient and only works in 32-bit. So you have to do something else. So it's useful to know, because if we know that the library comes up in somebody's conversion, we can't do anything with it. We'll have to use an alternative method to actually convert it to 64-bit. So we close there, and then we're going to copy these into a different table. The reason for this is it allows me to build up a collection of input information from varying people
to go into one update rather than do multiple updates. So kind of copy that in there. And hopefully it's going to work. Let's try again. Now, if we prepare the updates, it should have created an update file, which it has. And there we go. We've got our two functions. We've got the type, we've got its name, we've got its full declaration. It's full declaration, etc. So we're now going to close that. Close. Yes. We're now going to go back to our API viewer. And we're going to look for that redirection WOW 64. I'm going to paste that in there. Not found. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to do an update. This is the one we've just created at 1831. Say OK. Come to our declares. Put that name in again. So we've now got that declaration, which is in the API viewer. So if it needs to be used in future, then that's okay. And then we'll go back to our scanner. Next, and we're going to update. So the idea of this is that I can send updates to people who've got the scanner. All they'll need to do is download it from, or get it from an email, and then click OK. And now we'll search Colin's database again. This time there aren't any unknowns because we've made them known. But you still might need to make changes. We won't in Colin's code, but in general purposes, we would. Okay. So we've shown that there's a simple way of, from the scanner, getting the unknowns, sending them off, and I can take a look at them, see if I've already got copies or update versions, or look at them and then create an update so that the scanner can be updated and the API viewer can be updated. So obviously that's a problem because there's quite a lot of rather obscure ones out there, just designed to catch you. I'm just trying to catch up on my notes now.
Peter, do you want to answer questions completely at the end, or would you want to?
No, let's take a
right.
We've got and answer some questions. Yes.
Yeah, we've got 3 things that have come up so far. I'll get the people concerned to actually ask them. So, Chris, first of all, question about LoadCursor API, which I know you've discussed with him at some stage. If you can turn your microphone on, Chris, for me.
Mute. There we go. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hi, Peter.
Hi.
Yeah, we had the conversation about the LoadCursor API, which in the documentation declares the cursor name or LP cursor name as a string, but it doesn't work with that. I've been using it for donkey's years, and in 32-bit it's a long, and using it as a long in 64-bit does work for me. Did you have a look at that at all?
I haven't looked at it yet, I'm afraid to say. Sorry, it's on my list of things to look at.
Okay, but it'd be interesting to know whether have you just taken your structures of the APIs from the documentation?
I have mostly, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
I have fixed the 17 ones where they blatantly got it wrong.
Yeah.
Told Microsoft about it, but nothing's happened as yet, and I don't expect anything to happen.
No. Okay.
They just don't work. because they've got the actual alias names wrong.
Right. Okay.
Not very helpful.
No.
Okay.
All right then. That was me. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
Oh,
Right. Next question was from Neil Sargent, and it's a conditional compilation question. Neil, would you like to turn your microphone on?
Yeah. Hi, Peter.
Hi.
A lot of the code that I've had to convert has been pre-Access 2007 code.
Yeah.
Back in the older code, and so you have to use the #if VBA7 construct to declare long pointer variables, because the pre-VBA, the old VBA6 environment doesn't understand the word long pointer.
No.
So in the #else, you have to declare them as long pointer. Now, the downside on that is that everywhere you declare it, you also have to declare the variables in the dim statements.
Correct.
Conditionally. Does your system handle that sort of nuance?
I don't do pre-VBA7.
Right.
That is
Good answer.
that is a policy decision, because those systems are so far out of having any security updates that they shouldn't actually be connected to the internet if they are being used at all.
But you do change the data type of the parameters.
Oh yeah, but
and that's a big thing.
Oh yes. If it is VBA7 and can accept long pointer, then yes. What I'm not doing is anything which does pre-VBA7, because I don't know who's going to be getting this tool, and I don't know whether they were aware of the extreme risk that they are taking by using such out-of-date software. Well, there is advice from our GCHQ, which I believe your American equivalent, NSA, who say if you've got stuff which cannot be updated with security updates, then you should only have it disconnected from the internet. So quite strong on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
I've tried arguing with Peter about this. I haven't won the argument yet.
I wasn't going to raise the issue with it. If you'd done that to me 18 months ago, I would have done.
Oh,
but in my experience, the uptake of Office 365 is now so accelerated that I can't remember last time I encountered a pre-VBA6 or a pre-VBA7 client.
That is something I missed out. I've got in the notes, but I haven't got to that bit yet. There is obviously the case where people have MDE versions of things which are in pre-2010, and they don't necessarily have the source.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how many people are aware of it, that there is a way around that. Anybody know? Everything Access, Wayne Phillips does a VBA update version where he can extract an MDE and make it into an MDB. Same with ACCDE into DB. Almost unbelievable, but yes, you can do it. I have actually seen the results of an ACCDE, which was put back into ACCDB, and it's perfect. It's exactly the same as it was before. It's staggeringly good. So
it is. It's worth just stating, though, that it's not a hacker's tool. Wayne is scrupulous about getting people to prove ownership before he will take on the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And in fact, that can be difficult for developers who are sole developers like me, because how do you prove that it's your piece of work in that sense there? But anyway, it's an excellent tool. I agree with you totally.
But it is the way out of the problem of locked databases and having to continue to use old versions.
Yeah.
Because you can get around it.
But I still do get, just for your information, Peter, I still get approximately once a week, once a fortnight at most, a request to convert one of my free example utilities to an earlier version than 2010, particularly to 2007, I must say. And it surprises me how many people do still use them for whatever reason. Anyway, right, Crystal made a
Hopefully
comment.
not connected to the internet. Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
I wouldn't like to say. Crystal asked a comment, and I don't know where you were talking about this. Works for both. Great enhancement. Thanks, Peter. Do you know where you were when that was said, or does Crystal know where you were?
No.
I like the conditional compilation ability.
Right. Okay. Right. Any other questions before Peter moves on then? Right. Back to you, Peter.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, no.
Oh, sorry, Klaus. Klaus.
No, so sorry.
You nearly missed
just-
your chance.
So sorry. Just to have an info, I have an older database, which is also Access 2010 to 64-bit, the newest one. And it contains quite a lot of 64-bit change code. So if somebody has interest, I'm willing to share it. It's German and it's based on my old Noha MDB, which is 10 years old or so, or 20, I don't know. Just an info.
I will certainly be interested, so I can run it through the scanner and see whether there are some unknowns in there.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Great.
Thank you, Klaus. Right, Peter.
Okay, we're going to have a look at some slightly more complicated samples and see how the updater handles that. We're going to go to the updater. And we're going to look one which has got some registry code in it. Pretty quick. Take a look at the but again, we can see there's a massive number of changes gone on in there. It's not hard to do it by hand, it's just very, very tedious. I have changed where there is a user-defined type, and this is an odd variable name there. I have prefixed that with a UDT. Now, when you have types and you actually need the length of it, in 32-bit, you could use the len function, but for 64-bit, you have to use the lenb function. Now, by prefixing with UDT, I can tell when I'm checking my code, if there is an len on a UDT, then it needs to actually be changed to lenb. Whereas if you're actually handling a string, and of course you'd want to leave it as len, because that is the actual length of the string. So we've got that one done. Now we just have a look at this example. So we've got a test form there. It's telling us what type of information is required to run this function. So we've got a LongPtr, which is a sample is HKey current user, but you can't use that as a text because it's not actually a constant in the normal sense. It's not defined, but its value is one which we'll all remember. And then we're going to find a key, which is a string. And we're going to find a value. And then if we click that, it will return magic 20. And if I was to go into regedit, we would find that that key actually has that value of 20 on it. So this is just proving that the conversion has actually worked. Always useful to check. So I've now got another one, which is actually more interesting because it's got an actual 64-bit call in there. And to look at this one. Oh, just before we do that, we'll have a look at that. There's one from Stephen, however we pronounce it, Lebans, from a long time ago. He wouldn't actually do it this way, but it's a good example of how to handle things using points on the screen. So this needs updating. Just doesn't work, telling us that's wrong. So that was the 5-point test. Now we'll open up the converted one. Now I've just got a couple of things I need to fix here because I've got myself a little bit confused. It's rather complex. So I've got WDT there, and if we compile again, that should be a long PTR. So if we reach it, see in this current procedure. Okay. Now compile it. That is now okay. So if we go back into here and view this form view, and what this does, when you open this pull down, if you click on it, it tells you the number of the row. Obviously, lots better ways of doing it since 1999. But if we have a look at the code, we can see there's quite a lot of changes again. Now, that was what it used to say, window from point. The updater has added the if Win64. Here. All the other ones we'd expect. And down in the calling code, where it calls that Windows from point, it's added some extra code there, because when you're using Windows from point in 64-bit, it requires a long variable, and in 32-bit, it requires an X and a Y, two long variables. So that code has to be different. So we're calling this function here point to long, which has been added by the updater to the end of the module. So that will now work. We're getting close to time. Have we got any more questions now?
Nothing's come up in the chat so far, but been absolutely nobody. Everyone's generally saying gross on the screen. Does anyone want to ask Peter any questions at this point?
Just an info, just send the database.
Sorry, can you say, Klaus? I didn't understand that.
Oh, sorry. I just sent the database to Pete.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I had a question.
Sure.
That's Jenny, isn't it? Yep.
Yes, it is. On one of your other databases, you had that you were looking at the declare statements that I think it said the registry, but also constants. So do the constants change?
Constants are pretty constant. I have allowed for the possibility of things to change. They don't, they in general are pretty stable.
Because the reason I was interested in that is when I was doing the conversion today, which is obviously one I hadn't done before, there was one on the file picker or something like that where it came up and there was an MSO constant that it didn't recognize. And obviously I was able to compile it by putting in a value, but you've made me think that maybe just replacing it with a number might actually have been telling me that that constant isn't actually legitimate in 64-bit.
Can I come in? Peter may do a more detailed answer. I stopped using the MSO file save and so on back in 2015 because I've found that even if you compiled them correctly, converted them correctly, this still didn't work reliably, if at all. So I use different code now. I use file system object, for example. So as far as I know, Peter, correct me if I'm talking nonsense, they don't work reliably, if at all, in 64-bit, even when converted correctly.
Don't know yet.
Okay. Oh, but that's interesting. At least that means that I can raise that as a sort of question mark with them. It's a database I inherited, so I'm not completely familiar with all the potential codes.
There are a lot of old APIs that you no longer need to use. There are better, simpler ways that work in both businesses. And when Microsoft decide that it's time for us to upgrade to 128-bit, they will still continue to work, hopefully, as well. So in that particular case, I strongly suggest use file system object instead.
Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, I am one of my other samples, which I haven't got for today. I have been looking at that, and I have got it to work, but perhaps not under the same circumstances that you're in.
I think they're just doing it as a way of browsing to a file. So as you say, I'm sure I can find an alternative. Now I know to look, that not to pursue it.
Yeah, that is something I am building into my updater. I have got the idea of if you shouldn't be using that code anymore, or it's inadvisable to use it. I've put some hooks in there so I can do that.
Yeah, some redundant ones, because you don't always know all of them. And as I say, especially if you've inherited an older database.
So are we talking about the old MSO get file save name, get file name?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly.
The Ken Getz code.
That's what I was talking about, certainly.
Well,
this one was more of a file picker.
Right, I had to use the modern version of the file picker recently. I think it was doing conversions. And there's one of the things that hasn't been implemented in Access. I can't remember if it was the save as. The file save function, they haven't actually implemented. It does actually say, if you go into Microsoft Docs, it does say this hasn't been implemented in Access. Correct. And I was forced to do it a different way because I wanted to use that function. I forgot what it was. It was something to do with choosing the default folder for file save or something. I can't remember what it was.
There's 6 options and 2 of them don't work in Access full stop.
Right.
But as I say, I've stopped using them, so I can't tell you which ones don't work anymore.
Right.
I personally found there are no problems with the declares, but I found with the types that they changed the types or that combined. I mean that combined literals that they work differently. For the file size, for example, they have different. I think you call it types, which contain several constants, and that changed quite a lot.
Right.
Okay, shall we go back to Peter again? And have you got time? We've got time if you want to do another 5 or so minutes, Peter.
Right. Yes.
Will that give you long enough?
Yes, I'm just looking at the ones which we haven't looked at. We looked at the point test, and we haven't looked at this Ken Getz one. It's a nasty, confusing one. It's a file listing Now, although I'm actually only doing one module at a time on these samples, it will do a complete database, and it will work out which modules have got declares in, and actually only work on those. So it's not actually a very long process. Done a 50 megabytes or so size database, and it only took 2 or 3 minutes.
Very impressive.
Now, we have got a load of options which I haven't talked about yet. We can exclude things from the processing if we want to. We can add comments. This is the create text versions. That's so that we can do the WinMerge compare. So you don't, if you're confident you don't need that, you can leave that out off. This was for one specific customer who was using a record count on a record set from an old version, where he was using an int, and it can't actually be an int anymore. It has to be a long or long pointer. So this actually does put in a C long into the code where he's used an int, so that it then becomes the appropriate value and will compile properly. Exclusions. Now, we've only got one module in here, but if it was a whole database, it would list all the modules there, and then you can select and exclude so it isn't processed. So you can just do bits, highlight and push it back again. Yeah, there's 2 in there. We'll look at that in just a second. Permanent exclusions. So I've said I use VB Watchdog and VB Mappy. So I don't want it to ever try and do any updating on those files, on those modules, because Wayne has done the job perfectly. So you wouldn't want to process that. You've also got some other ones which I can't remember. Is it Kevin Bell who's involved with these ones?
Fast Dialogue is Kevin Bell, or the GDI Plus could be the ribbon creator Gunter Avenius.
No, it's not. I think this is bits which have been included in Kevin's things.
Right. Okay. Anyway.
But those are so incredibly complex, and they are already 64-bit. So there is no way that you want to be trying to make any modifications to those automatically or even manually. So you want to exclude those. So this allows you to exclude modules which you know are already 64-bit updated. So again, I've sort of given it a bit of thought, because you don't want to be trying to fix things which are already fixed, because you probably break them. Obviously, we've seen the analysis, we've seen the updates. I'm not using a back-end database on this updater. It's deliberate to save me support questions about what's happened to my data. It's all contained within the database, because this is a one-time process, or 2 or 3 times process. You run it on a database, look at the results, make some adjustments to the original code perhaps, or exclude things, then you'd run it again. But it's not something that you're going to want to store to use again in future. So it can be quite happily be cleared off and then compacted. So this will compact on exit. If you set it, that will set it for the next time you exit, it will compact. And then this will be back to not compacting when it opens and closes next time. Problems, not going to actually show you anything at the moment because there aren't any problems, but this captures some of the problems in the database, which I've recognized are where types have got messed up or something. So it will give you an indication of what module, what the details of the problem and what the code was. Okay, now so again, a lovely old one from 1997. that has been updated. And this is finding files with attributes. Again, you probably do it a different way these days, but it's something which may occur in databases. And the idea of the updater is, although it may not give you the best solution, at least it gives you a solution which will run, and you can then fix your code later. Obviously, there's sometimes it can be a bit urgent, as Jenny said, she needed to do the update fairly quickly, so you have to sometimes do that. Now, I've still got a little bit of work to do on this, because if we compile this, we're going to find that this variable is not declared correctly. You can edit this bit out of the video if you like, Colin, because by the time that people see it,
I might leave it in to show you're mortal, actually, but
that should be a long PTR. You wouldn't believe how difficult it was to get that to get even close to working. Well, perhaps you would believe it. Well, you probably would. You've done a lot of them. And then the other one, yeah, should be a long PTR, a long PT. Only in this procedure, because you might find it elsewhere where it doesn't need replacing. So you have to be very careful. In my processing, I obviously limit the changes I make to within the procedure where the variable is declared. Okay,
are you, Peter, are you scrupulous about changing the prefix on all of your variables? I must admit, I can see the point in doing it. I'm too lazy to do so, and I probably regret it later. But
because I'm needing to know what type it is when I'm comparing the declared or the dim version with a parameter in the declaration, I've got to know what type they are. So I need to, if I haven't got a prefix on it, I've got to store it in another table to say that variable at that moment in time has got that type. But of course, it will change as things, as you work through a procedure. If there are multiple calls which use that variable, it will get changed. So it's a lot easier to do it by declaring prefixing with the type. If people don't want to actually use the prefixes because they have an aversion to prefixes, I have in the options in the updater the option to not do the code updates. So it can just do the declares, and then you can go and manually do all your updating of your code. But I think you've probably seen from the WinMerge versions that even on something fairly simple, there's a lot of changes to be made if you do it manually. Well, yeah, people know that, don't they? So this should now compile. Oh, no, there's one more on. Right, this is something because they've done something really weird with their types. Again, that's in the process of being fixed. This one is not obvious, but I know it because I've been working on this for. Now it will compile. Okay.
And DW stands for?
Is that word? DW?
Oh, D word.
D word, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to be a trick question. I genuinely couldn't think either.
No, if we go back up.
Yeah,
here,
registry, isn't it? Yeah.
Here we go. The Win32 find data. Now, the majority of APIs that I've found, when they've used a type, they have stuck with the original naming of the parameter or the type fields. So they haven't been fanatic like me about prefixing, but in this particular case, they had prefixed some of them. So that's why that didn't work, because that was an LNG and it should be DW. Now I am actually going through in my code to fix that. If that type had been used within a with statement, that would have now fixed it. But because they've actually used the actual type dot, or I haven't actually got that fixed. So works most of the time, but not if they haven't used the with. So that now works. It now compiles. And this is a little test routine I've added at the end of it. And it's going to find all my ACCDBs in my documents folder. And there we go, 6 of them. All very well named, so they're meaningful. Okay, so that was a complex one because it uses a class module with a callback. So to test I think this is the callback function. No, it's the other one. Yeah, this doesn't work in the 64-bit yet, so I'm working on that bit. So as you can see, a reasonable amount of effort being put into this.
It's incredibly impressive and so thorough. I wouldn't expect any less of you, but it is still very, very thorough. And I've been doing conversions for years. I'll just break off for a second just to say that I was given 2 weeks notice of converting my most important commercial database for 64-bit, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so I just added print safe to everything and converted all longs to long pointers and hoped, and of course it compiled perfectly, and I sent it off, and it's amazing. It took at least 2 months before the complaints of things not working started coming in. So don't do what I did, is what I'm saying. It's for converting everything to long pointer might seem a simple solution. It won't work.
In worst case, it crashes the thing completely.
Yeah, I'm amazed. It was a huge database, front end, 150 megabytes, hundreds of APIs, most of which I didn't understand at the time, probably still don't. And as I said, in a rush, I had no idea what to do because you weren't around at the time, nor was Philip Stiefel publishing stuff at the time. And so I just did what I could. So, have you got more you want to cover today, Peter?
No, I think we've covered. I think it's sufficient. Hopefully sufficient. Show it works. It updates.
Thank you ever so much. Seriously, that was outstandingly good and a very, very clear presentation. I'm very impressed indeed. And is there anyone who wants to ask Peter any other questions before I come back to ask him 2 or 3 questions and related to his product?
I'm sorry, I have. It's Jenny.
Hello, Jenny.
Hi. The databases that you're using, are you using them in 32-bit or 64-bit?
If I'm doing the scan, that can be 32 or 64. I don't know. I haven't tried this on 64, on 32, because
so are you generally working in 64, converting an older database, a 32-bit database, into 64? So you're kind of pulling it up rather than pushing it out?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, right. Questions for Peter then. We know that you're going to offer 2 things, at least 2 things to the audience here, which I will put up on the website. Can you just remind people what you will be offering for free?
Right, the API viewer and the scanner, which tells you how many declares there are in your database, so you can get a clue of what kind of scale of operation it is. So if you've only got 2 or 3 declares in, then you don't need to be too worried, because it's not going to be too much effort to do it manually. But if you've got more than half a dozen, then it's starting to get a bit tedious, and you get like 50, then yeah, it's going to take you ages to do it manually.
And if you're trying to convert something from Stephen Lebans' site, then it's, yeah, it is going to. But you're also going to have a commercial program, which is your converter. Now, obviously, for those people who've got a lot to do, especially if they've got a lot to do in a short period of time, that's going to be very much worth their while. Have you fixed the price?
Currently £189.
Thank you.
Which works at $230 odd US and $300 Canadian, which I've had the feedback from a Canadian who'd just done it manually, unfortunately, before he found my thing. Said, goodness, that's cheap. But,
that probably works out about 10p an hour in terms of cost, in terms of the time of doing it all for a large database yourself. So it is certainly excellent there. That's brilliant. Anyone? So we'll have the files that are available free on the website within the next few days. And if for anyone who's not familiar with that, if you go to the dashboard on the website, and then in the middle of the screen, I might as well bring this up on the screen, really, mightn't I? So Peter, can I take the sharing back?
Yes, certainly.
Right, so this is the member dashboard part of the Access Europe website. So it tells you the future events coming up there. In the middle there, it's got the files that you can download. And on the right-hand side, it has the most recent YouTube video, one way of getting to it. And you can also go to the playlist of all of the other ones as well. And anyone who's here, possibly including Jenny, who actually isn't a subscriber, please do subscribe.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's not meant to make you feel guilty. It's just to say that then you will get notification of future meetings, and hopefully they'll be as useful to you as this one seems to be for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, right. So,
and I have one question to Peter. Is I have a quite different approach to changing these 32 to 64-bit. I'm just trying always to change the function itself, and also, of course, also the declares and everything, but mainly the functions, because I found that Google finds quite a lot of functions which are 64-bit already ready in Google. Just a hint, if you want to translate something or change it from 32 to 64-bit, and if you don't know what to do, ask Google for the 64-bit version. Mostly they have, or often they have.
The problem is that with that is that I can't automate that, whereas doing it this way, we can automate it, as you've seen it.
Yeah, of course.
That will.
And let me say something, Klaus. Yes, I have done those searches too, and one by one you can find them. But what Peter has done is he has gone through all of them.
1,500.
Right, that's awesome, and I appreciate it quite a lot. I just wanted to say, if you have just 4 or 5 functions which you want to change, then that's also a possible way to do it. Because I found that the problem is that you don't find always the 64-bit declaration in the document, and all that automation only works if you have the 64-bit version of the of that.
There are only 17 functions out of the 1,550 in the Microsoft text file which are actually 64-bit. Everything else will work 32 or 64, so long as you're using LongPtr, because LongPtr automatically adjusts. So there's a lot of people who've made mistakes out there by putting in, if a 64-bit version, they've used long, and then used long if it's a 32-bit version. And Microsoft have done away with that by using the LongPtr. That,
Yeah.
of calling what that comes in with what Colin was saying, of course, is when it comes to 128-bit, if your functions are written as long, then or long, they're not going to work anymore in the 128-bit. Whereas if you've written it with LongPtr, they are going to work because Microsoft will have adjusted it so that it becomes 128-bit when it's in that version of Office, Windows, whatever it's called at the time.
Yeah.
So it's an inherently safe way of doing it. There is an awful lot of misunderstanding, is that most functions work fine, either 32 or 64-bit, but it's only the LongPtr, or the LongPtrs which need to be adjusted. Masses of people, even well-respected MVPs, none of them who are attending here, but who have got things wrong, and actually, well, not wrong, but have done it in a way which isn't inherently safe for the 128-bit that Colin's promising soon. He knows all. He knows about what's coming. Now he's an MVP, does he?
I wish. And I'm hoping that I will have completely retired by the time 128-bit comes in, but you never know. Anyway, okay, right. Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Colin, can I make an announcement?
Yes, you can. Go on, because it's already been preempted.
Okay, so I put a link in the chat. Firstly, thank you, Peter. Impressive work on converting 32-bit API declarations to 64-bit. And many thanks for freely sharing your API viewer and scanner. So many databases are still in 32-bit. Your long hours and experimentation is much appreciated to those who need to move an application to 64-bit. It is my pleasure and honor to announce that 2 days ago, on the 1st of August, 2022, Colin Riddington, aka Isla Dogs, received the Microsoft MVP Award for his excellent contribution and knowledge of Access. Colin has deep knowledge of Access. He builds many useful, creative, and impressive applications that he freely shares, and he's a great teacher. Colin co-hosts this Access Europe user group with Alessandro Grimaldi, who is traveling and can't be here today. Congratulations, Colin. Thanks for sharing your amazing applications and knowledge about Access. You so much deserve to be an MVP, and I'm very happy to see you awarded. If y'all want to turn your mic on, join me in singing and clapping for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow.
Oh,
Sound like you did a collection tin there. Crystal, thank you very much indeed. You've totally embarrassed me, of course, as I knew you would do, but thank you. Yes, I was, and if I can just also publicly thank Crystal in particular, who's the MVP who first encouraged me to go for the MVP award. I still haven't got the right wording there. That was 2 years ago, and I put her off at the time, saying I was too busy and I had other things to do. And I finally got around to doing it in March, April, with a lot of support from Crystal and other MVPs as well. And it takes many months before Microsoft make their mind up. I did time it badly, but that's another matter. But yes, I was awarded 2 days ago, which was very gratifying. I now have a profile page there, which I haven't yet done anything with on my website, but I will do so. So I am hoping to be a valuable member of their team. Certainly it's been a team that I've looked up to for many years, and I'm still not sure I'm worthy of the place, but I'm certainly happy to join them. And trying to move away from that next month is me. And I'm doing a completely different sort of topic here about ways of getting your queries to be as optimized as possible and to run as efficiently as possible, and 2 tools to help you do that. I've got a series of speed comparison tests that I'm going to be working with next month, and 2 tools that Access has built in. JET ShowPlan, which is not particularly well known, but has been around for 20 plus years, undocumented. I'll show you how to use that. And if you still do have 2010 or earlier, another tool you can use called ISAM Stats, which are not, although you'll still find it listed in Access 2016 and 365, it doesn't work anymore, but it's still available for those who actually have that older version. And if you want to know more about the next month's event, then I've given you some details there, and also a couple of links to my website and so on. So I very much hope to see you there, and hopefully it will be half as useful as Peter's. It will be worth it in itself. But again, I'd like to say how much I've enjoyed and found useful Peter's session today. Thanks for watching. See you next month.